quick update. My blender broke recently,
That's
and
annoying.
it's probably from overuse and because it was ancient. And
We
so
love an ancient kitchen utensil
can you just
appliance.
picture it like those ones that are off-white colored with like orange
Oh my
buttons and
God,
stuff?
yes.
Yeah. So
Not the orange buttons, dude.
yeah, so now that it is gone, rest in peace. Um,
RIP.
I want to replace it with something that's more convenient, not as bulky, and that's where the BlendJet 2 comes in.
Hell yeah. The BlendJet 2 is portable, so you can blend up a smoothie at work, a protein shake at the gym, or even a margarita on the beach, which is
Mhm.
exactly how I plan to use it.
Of
It's small
course.
enough to fit in a cup holder, but powerful enough to blast through tough ingredients like ice and frozen fruit with ease. The BlendJet 2 is whisper quiet, so you can make your morning smoothie without waking up the whole house, or in my case, my morning margarita. It lasts for 15 plus blends and recharges quickly via USB-C. Best of all, BlendJet 2 cleans itself. Just blend water with a drop of soap and you are good to go. They have a ton of cool colors and patterns. Definitely need to add the Lisa Frank one to my cart ASAP because that just is such a cute, nostalgic blast from the past.
Of course. Yep. So you can blend anytime, anywhere with the BlendJet 2 portable blender. And to get one for yourself, go to blendjet.com and use our code, which is GGS12, and you'll get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping.
Oh, yeah. Hello.
Hello.
It's been a rough week, everyone.
We're a little distracted.
We're a little distracted this week, but we have some nice, creepy content for you today. And
We
before I
do.
forget, I'm Olivia,
And I'm Amy.
and this
And
is
Girls Gone
Girls Gone
Spooky.
Spooky.
Yeah.
Um, Today we are talking about creepy jacks. And by that,
That's such
I
an
don't
odd
mean the
theme.
game. It's a very odd theme. It's a bit of a stretch,
Mhm.
but the name is in common,
Yeah,
so it's fine. Go with it,
yeah,
everyone. Go with it.
yeah.
So we are going to be talking about spring-heeled Jack
Uh-huh.
and eyeless Jack.
Ooh.
So should I just get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here we go, team. Okay. Spring-heeled Jack. And in case the way I'm saying that isn't clear, spring is in the season,
Uh-huh,
heeled as in heel, the part of your foot, like
uh-huh.
hopping
Yep.
on springs.
Uh-huh.
It's just a weird name, so I
Yeah,
just want to clarify.
it
Oh,
is. Oh.
Jesus. Our mascot just scared the shit out of me. Anyway, be a good kitty. Okay, so precedents for spring-heeled Jack, like the quick little synopsis. So,
Okay.
Spring-heeled Jack is an entity in English folklore of the Victorian era. The first claimed sighting of Spring-heeled Jack was 1837. So we're talking like
Wow.
a ways back,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Victorian OG creeper.
Right.
Later sightings were reported all over the United Kingdom and especially prevalent in suburban London, the Midlands, and Scotland. So spread kind of all over the UK following 1837.
Mhm.
There are many theories about the nature and identity of Spring-heeled Jack, and he's considered to be an urban legend. Became very popular in its time due to tales of his very bizarre physical appearance and ability to make extraordinary leaps, hence his goofy name,
Uh-huh.
to the point that he became the topic of several works of fiction. So if you're
Oh.
interested in reading a little novel about Jackie Boy, you can do that. There was actually a like, you know how they used to release like I think Bronte and like Jane Austen. I think they used to release books this way too, or Shakespeare too, where it would be like issues. So it'd be like
Mhm.
episode one kind of in the
Yeah.
paper or whatever. So you could
Mhm.
buy it for a penny or whatever.
Yeah.
So those were written it was written in that way. The novel's written about him. So people who claim to have seen him described him as having a terrifying and frightful
Experience.
appearance
Mhm.
with, quote, diabolical physiognomy. I've never heard
Wow.
someone use that word before, but it's
No.
like your body.
Uh-huh.
um,
Uh-huh.
clawed hands, eyes that resembled red balls of fire, and that's a quote.
Mhm.
One report claimed that beneath a black cloak, this is kind of a funny image, he wore a helmet and a tight-fitting, just wait, and a tight-fitting white garment like an oilskin. So
He
just
sounds
like
hot.
an all-white bodysuit with a
Uh-huh.
helmet and a cloak. Okay, our mascot is biting the shit out of me. Why? I'm having
It's
a
gotten
bad
into you.
day. Can't you sense that? I feel like he can sense it and he's fucking with me for that reason. Also, he somehow, like, they're like caps on screws in furniture.
Mhm.
He peeled the cap off of something and I don't know what.
Oh.
So
Mhm.
that's the problem for another time.
Mischievous.
Mischievous little demon. Okay. So yeah. Weird
He's looking good.
helmet boy. He's good. But honestly, if I were jumping off buildings from building to building, not jumping off, but from building to building, taking like Daredevil style leaps,
Uh-huh.
I probably would also wear a helmet along with like elbow
A
pads for
bodysuit.
knee
Yeah.
pads,
Uh-huh.
padded bodysuit. I don't
Mhm.
know. We don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. So, many stories also mention a devil like aspect. So, like some mystical power kind of thing, partially stemming from the physical ability to leap
Mhm.
longer than most, like farther distances than we think should be possible.
Mhm.
Um, Others say he was tall and thin with the appearance more of like a gentleman, so he more would like blend in. And several reports mention that he could breathe out blue and white flames and that he wore
Hmm.
sharp metallic claws at his fingertips.
Wow.
At least two people who claimed to come into contact with him said he was able to speak highly comprehensible English. So he maybe was a man at some
Yeah.
point and morphed into this thing or was possessed by something. We don't know.
Hmm.
So, some like a little bit of background of London in this time, because that was the first sighting was in London. So,
Mhm.
in early 19th century London, there were reports of ghosts that would stalk the streets. So, they were human-like figures or specters that were described as being very pale, and it was believed that they stalked and preyed on lone pedestrians. And if I'm not mistaken, this is also the time of like Jack the Ripper, I believe.
Yeah.
So Jack is just like, you're like, oh, villain,
Yeah.
Jack.
Jack.
um, and it makes you wonder too, like these like pale beings, like haunting, stalking like lone pedestrians in the middle of the
Mhm.
night, stumbling home from the bars. Like it could have been a serial killer.
Right. Yeah, it could
So
have.
let's not, like
Mhm.
completely rule that out.
Yeah.
Um, so stories told of these figures formed part of a distinct ghost tradition in London, which some writers have argued actually formed the foundation of the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack, which came a little bit later once this was more established. And just as like a quick like additional little piece of content, the most important of these ghostly entities was actually the Hammersmith ghost, which for like time reference in 1803 and 1804 was reported in Hammersmith, which was on the western fringes of London, and later reappeared in 1824. There was another apparition also became very popular called the Southampton ghost, who was reported as assaulting individuals in the night. I don't know the nature of those assaults, but it's creepy.
Yeah.
Um, and this Southampton ghost in particular actually bore many of similar characteristics to Spring-Heeled Jack, reported as jumping over houses, being over 10 feet tall, as a person, 10 feet tall, not
Yeah.
houses, 10 feet tall.
Right.
Um, so, okay, so now let's talk about Spring-Heeled Jack. So the first alleged sightings of Spring-Heeled Jack were made in London in 1837, like I said, and the last reported sighting is said in most of the literature to have been made in Liverpool in 1904.
Hmm.
So 70-ish years,
Yeah.
almost 70 years. According to later accounts, in October of 1837, so like none of this was really recorded at that time, but people like came back to it a little bit later.
Mhm.
A girl by the name of Mary Stevens was walking to Lavender Hill, which is like so,
Uh-huh.
um, where she was working as a servant after visiting her parents in Battersea. On her way through Clapham Common, a strange figure leapt at her from a dark alley. After immobilizing her with a tight grip of his arms, he began to kiss her face while
Oh.
ripping her clothes and touching her flesh with his claws, which were, according to her deposition, cold and clammy as those of a corpse.
Uh,
In panic, the girl screamed, good for you, making the attacker quickly flee from the scene. The commotion brought several residents who immediately launched a search for the aggressor, but he could not be found. The next day, the leaping character is said to have chosen a very different victim near Mary Stevens' home, inaugurating a method that would reappear in later reports. He jumped in the way of a passing carriage, causing the coachman to lose control, crash, and severely injure himself. Several witnesses claimed that he escaped by jumping over a 9 foot or 2.7 meter, for those on the metric system, high wall while cackling with a high pitched, ringing laughter. Gradually, the news of the strange character spread, and soon the press and the public gave him the name Spring-Heeled Jack. So, a few months after these first sightings, on January 9th, 1838, the Lord Mayor of London, Sir John Cowan, revealed at a public session held in the Mansion House an anonymous complaint that he had received several days earlier, which he had withheld in the hope of obtaining further information. So, this is just a couple months after the attacks. The correspondent who signed the letter as a resident of Peckham wrote, quote, "It appears that some individuals of, as the writer believes, the highest ranks of life, have laid a wager with a mischievous and foolhardy companion, that he durst not take upon himself the task of visiting many of the villages near London in 3 different disguises, a ghost, a bear, and a devil. And moreover, that he will not enter a gentleman's gardens for the purpose of alarming the inmates of the house. The wager has, however, been accepted, and the unmanly villain has succeeded in depriving 7 ladies of their senses, 2 of whom are not likely to recover, but to become burdens to their families. At one house, the man rang the bell, and on the servant coming to open door, this worse than brute stood in no less dreadful figure than a spectre clad most perfectly. The consequence was that the poor girl immediately swooned, and has never from that moment been in her senses. The affair has now been going on for some time, and strange to say, the papers are still silent on the subject. The writer has reason to believe that they have the whole history at their finger ends, but through interested motives are induced to remain silent." End quote.
Interesting.
So the Lord Mayor, who's sharing this complaint in the Mansion House, this public session, he was very skeptical. But a member of the audience confirmed that, quote, "servant girls about Kensington, Hammersmith, and Ealing, all neighborhoods in London, tell dreadful stories of this ghost or devil." And that complaint referenced one specific girl, but there were
Mhm.
7, they
Right.
said. So
Mhm.
kind of makes sense that more people would be like, "Oh, yeah, we know what
Yeah.
they're talking." The matter was reported in the Times on January 9th and other national papers on January 10th. And on the day after that, the Lord Mayor showed a crowded gathering a pile of letters from various places in and around London complaining of similar, quote, "wicked pranks." The quantity of letters that poured into the Mansion House suggests that the stories were widespread in suburban London. So it's hard to say, though, like chicken or the egg. Like, was it that these things had already happened and finally it being publicized, people felt comfortable coming forward? Or was it like it's sensationalized, so now
Yeah.
we're going to have our 15 minutes of fame or
Right.
whatever?
Mhm.
One writer said several young women in Hammersmith had been frightened into dangerous fits and some severely wounded by a sort of claws the miscreant wore on his hands, which leads to these like metallic claws that
Right.
allegedly he wore. Another
Mhm.
correspondent claimed that in Stockwell, Brixton, Camberwell, and Vauxhall or Vauxhall, several people had died of fright and others had had fits. Meanwhile, another reported that the trickster had been repeatedly seen in Lewisham and Blackheath. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing those neighborhoods right. So the Lord Mayor himself was of two minds about the whole thing. He thought the greatest exaggerations had been made and that it was quite impossible that the ghost performs the feats of a devil upon earth. This is a quote from him.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, someone he trusted had told him of a servant girl at Forest Hill who'd been scared into some sort of fit by a figure in bear's skin. So remember the devil, the
Yeah.
ghost, the bear.
The bear.
And
Mhm.
he was confident the person or persons involved would be caught and punished. So he was kind of like, okay, I know some of this is legit, and I also think some of this is garbage. So not really sure. So the police were instructed to search for the individual responsible for the bearskin situation, and rewards were offered. A peculiar report from the Brighton Gazette, which appeared in April of that year of 38, which was a part of the Times, the Brighton Gazette, related how a gardener in Rose Hill, Sussex, had been terrified by a creature of unknown nature. The Times wrote that Spring-Heeled Jack has, it seems, found his way to the Sussex coast, even though the report bore little resemblance to other accounts of Jack. The incident occurred on April 13th, when it appeared to a gardener in the shape of a bear or some other four-footed animal. Having attracted the gardener's attention with a growl, it then climbed the garden wall and ran along it on all fours before jumping down and chasing the gardener for some time. After terrifying the gardener, the apparition scaled the wall and made its exit. So just like super weird
Yeah.
shit.
It's so weird how many people have seen this.
So many.
It's like
So
beyond an urban legend at that
yeah,
point.
yeah.
It's weird.
So there are two alleged incidents that are the most widely covered in the time, like contemporary. Um, they were attacks on two teenage girls, Lucy Scales and Jane Alsop. The Jane Alsop report was widely covered by the newspapers, including a piece in the Times. There were fewer reports in relation to the attack on Scales, but the press coverage of these two attacks were really what like raised the profile of Spring-Heeled Jack as like a singular entity, kind of like haunting the city, basically. So we'll start with the Alsop case. So Jane Alsop reported that on the night of February 19, 1838, she answered the door of her father's house to a man claiming to be a police officer, which reminds me of Bundy. Didn't
Yeah.
he do that? Didn't he pretend to
Um,
be a police officer a couple times?
I'm sure he did. He
Probably
was
fucking
a creep
psycho.
beyond
Beyond,
everything.
yeah. Um, okay, so he claimed to be a police officer, told her to bring a light, claiming, "We have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane." She brought the person a candle and noticed that he wore a large cloak. The moment she handed him the candle, however, he threw off the cloak and, quote, presented a most hideous and frightful appearance, end quote, vomiting blue and white flame from his mouth, while his eyes resembled, quote, red balls of fire, end quote. Miss Alsop reported that he wore a large helmet and that his clothing, which appeared to be very tight fitting, resembled white oilskin. Without saying a word, he caught hold of her and began tearing her gown with his claws, which she was certain were of some kind of metallic substance. She screamed for help and managed to get away from him, running toward the house. He caught her on the steps and tore her neck and arms with his claws. She was rescued by one of her sisters, after which her assailant fled. So her sister heard her
Wow.
screaming, came to her rescue, but he had like fucked her up. Like
Yeah.
she was like attacked. So the Scales case, that was February 19. This is February 28 of that same year. So just a few days later, 9 days later, after the attack on Miss Alsop, 18-year-old Lucy Scales and her sister were returning home after visiting their brother, a butcher who lived in a respectable part of Limehouse. Miss Scales stated in her deposition to the police that as she and her sister were passing along Green Dragon Alley, they observed a person standing in an angle of the passage, which reading this reminded me of that incident at school where you guys saw someone like leaning against the fence and there had been like attacks in the parking lot. We'll get back to that.
Yeah.
But that, standing
Uh-huh.
in an alley totally
Yeah.
reminded me of that. So they observed a person standing in the angle of the passage. She was walking in front of her sister at the time, and just as she came up to the person, who was, of course, wearing a large cloak, he spurted a quantity of blue flame in her face, which deprived her of her sight and so alarmed her that she instantly dropped to the ground and was seized with violent fits, which continued for several hours. Her brother added that on the evening in question, he had heard the loud screams of one of his sisters moments after they had left his house, and on running up Green Dragon Alley, he found his sister Lucy on the ground in a fit, with her other sister, attempting to hold and support her. She was taken home, and then he learned from his other sister what had happened because she saw the whole thing. She described Lucy's assailant as being of tall, thin, gentlemanly appearance, covered in a large cloak, and carrying a small lamp or bullseye lantern similar to those used by the police. The individual did not speak, nor did he try to lay hands on them, but instead walked quickly away. So after she started seizing, he didn't attack her, he just ran or walked quickly. Every effort was made by the police to discover the author of these and similar outrages, and several persons were questioned but were set free. So,
Interesting.
yeah. So the Alsop attack was reported on in the Times on March 2nd of that year under the heading The Late Outrage at Old Ford. And this was followed with an account of the trial of Thomas Milbank, who immediately after the reported attack on Alsop had boasted in the Morgan's Arms, which I assume is a bar or something like that he was Spring-Heeled Jack. So of course, then he was arrested. He was arrested and tried. The arresting officer was a man named James Lee, who had earlier arrested infamous murderer whose name was William Corder, who was known as the Red Barn murderer. Milbank had been wearing white overalls and a great coat, which he dropped outside the house, and the candle he dropped was also found. So there was significant evidence that this guy maybe was the guy, and also the fact that he straight up said, "I'm Spring-Heeled Jack." He escaped conviction only because Jane insisted her attacker had breathed fire, and Milbank admitted he could do no such thing. Most of the other accounts were written long after the date. Contemporary newspapers do not mention them. So these incidents skyrocketed Spring-Heeled Jack to fame, became one of the most popular characters of the period, and his alleged exploits were reported in newspapers, became the subject of several penny dreadfuls and plays performed in cheap theaters that were very popular at the time. The Devil was even renamed Spring-Heeled Jack in some Punch and Judy shows, as recounted by Henry Mayhew in his London Labor and London Poor. Quote, "This here is Satan. We might say the devil, but that ain't right. And gentlefolks don't like such words. He is now commonly called Spring-Heeled Jack or the Russian Bear. That's since the war." So he became basically the whole point of that is it was pop culturally very relevant. As his fame grew, though, reports of appearances became less frequent, but more widespread. So it spread outside of London to other parts of the UK. In 1843, however, a wave of sightings swept the country again. A report from Northamptonshire described him as the very image of the devil himself, with horns and eyes of flame. And in East Anglia, reports of attacks on drivers of mail coaches became common. So remember, that was one of the ways that he would jump out in the street, scare the carriage driver.
Right.
In July 1847, a Spring-Heeled Jack investigation in Teignmouth, Devon, led to a Captain Finch being convicted of 2 charges of assault against women, during which he is said to have been disguised in a skin coat, which had the appearance of bullock's hide, skull cap, horns, and mask. I don't know what all of those things are, but a suit, basically, like an outfit of some kind. The legend was linked with the phenomenon of the devil's footprints, which appeared in Devon in February 1855, and I didn't know what this was. So this was a phenomenon that occurred in 1855. After heavy snowfall, trails of hoof-like marks appeared overnight in the snow, covering a total distance of some 40 to 100 miles or 60 to 160 kilometers. The footprints were so called because some religious leaders suggested that they were the tracks of Satan and
Oh.
made comparisons to a cloven hoof. Many
Hmm.
theories have been made to explain what this probably actually really was, but
Mhm.
there was a lot of,
Right.
uproar about all
Yeah.
of this. So, the last reports of Spring-heeled Jack. In the beginning of the 1870s, Jack was reported again in several places relatively distant from each other. So, in November of 1872, the News of the World reported that Peckham was in a state of commotion owing to what is known as the Peckham ghost, a mysterious figure quite alarming in appearance. The editorial pointed out that it was none other than Spring-heeled Jack, who terrified a past generation. Similar stories were then published in the Illustrated Police News. And then in April and May 1873, there were numerous sightings in Sheffield of the quote, park ghost, which locals also came to identify as Spring-heeled Jack. So it almost just became like, it's all Spring-heeled Jack.
Right.
Anything weird and creepy, like
He's the
stalking
scapegoat.
the
Yeah.
town, it's him.
Mhm.
So, um, some of the sort of like aftermath, I guess, there was a huge urban legend. Like, and you can see that from the last reports, they call them, but who
Yeah.
knows if it was really the same person or thing or whatever.
Right.
But his existence and like, you can see how popular he became for contemporaries of the time. So for decades, especially in London, his name was basically synonymous with the boogeyman.
Yeah.
As a means of scaring children into behaving, telling them if they're not good, Spring-heeled Jack would leap up and peer at them through their bedroom windows at night. And fictional entertainment is where he really like took off because people
Mhm.
like scared and obviously
Yeah.
like a controlled way. But they also believe that um, he kind of influenced like not only villain characters but heroic characters, so like vigilante style
Mhm.
justice characters in comics
Yeah.
later on in the 1900s. So by the early 1900s, he was already being represented as a costumed kind of altruistic avenger of wrong. So like kind of like a Batman
Yeah.
type, protector of the innocent, etc. Even though
Mm.
clearly he just like attacked young women.
Right. Yeah.
So don't know about that.
Mm-mm.
Um, and then the last piece I'll share is just like the paranormal conjectures. Obviously, there's a ton of like skeptical positions
Yeah.
about this whole thing, that this was like probably one guy who was like
Mhm.
terrorizing these neighborhoods and young women, just a predator, and
Yeah.
maybe had some sort of like figured out some way to like light a flame and
Yeah.
blow some chemical and make it look like he
Mhm.
was breathing fire or whatever.
Yeah.
So there, of course, have been a variety of wildly speculative paranormal explanations to explain the origin of Spring-heeled Jack, including that he was an extraterrestrial entity with a
Oh.
non-human appearance and features. For
Hmm.
example, retro-reflective red eyes, phosphorus breath, which we've heard, superhuman agility, deriving from life on maybe a high gravity world. So he'd be able to
Oh.
jump higher in our world.
Yeah.
Um, and also just like general strange behavior that may come from like differences in atmosphere. Also, of course, that he was a demon, which I think is probably the
Yep.
most obvious.
Uh-huh.
Um, Either accidentally or purposefully summoned into this world by practitioners of the occult,
Mm.
or who made himself manifest simply to create spiritual turmoil. But that brings you back back to the first complaint that the Lord Mayor had shared in that
Yeah.
session, that like
Uh-huh.
someone had like contracted this person to do these things,
Yeah.
which makes me wonder, like, do you think that was maybe a guilty conscience? Like whoever wrote that was
Oh.
like, shit, what I
Oops.
do.
Yeah.
Please.
Good thought.
Um, yeah. So there were a couple authors, particularly Lauren Coleman and Jerome Clark, who list Spring-heeled Jack in a category of just like phantom attackers, with other well-known examples like Mad Gasser of Mattoon. I don't know who that is, but apparently there's
Mm-mm.
a list of these like across different cultures and regions of the world, like pretty well-known attackers that kind of snowball into these like characters or identities.
Mhm.
Typically, these phantom attackers tend to be human, or appear to be human, I should say, and may be perceived as prosaic criminals, but many also display these extraordinary abilities. So his jumping, obviously, which
Mhm.
would, according to like what he is reported to have done, like how he's reported to have jumped, the height and distance and all of that, they would have broken the ankles of any human. Like your
Right.
joints wouldn't be
Yeah.
able
Would
to
give
stand
out.
these. Even if you had the physical like power to
Mhm.
make the jump, your body wouldn't be able to land
Right.
in a way that
Hmm.
wouldn't hurt you.
Interesting.
Um, Victims commonly experience, this is phantom attackers generally, victims commonly experience the attack in their bedrooms, homes, or other seemingly secure enclosures. They may report being pinned or paralyzed. Obviously, like all these girls having these like fits and stuff. Like I feel like people don't just like have fits. Like you could freak
No.
out, but
Yeah.
just like laying on the ground having, I don't know, what even is a fit? I don't know.
Right. I think sometimes they describe seizures as fits,
Well,
but
right. That's
I
what
don't
I
know.
think of,
It's
but
like when during the Salem witch trials, but most of
mhm,
those girls were probably faking those fits at a certain point.
right.
So,
So fucked up.
yeah.
So fucked up.
Something like that, I guess.
Yeah. So, um, yeah. So many report being pinned or paralyzed. Others describe some sort of siege. That's the word they use, in which they fought off a persistent intruder. Many reports can readily be explained psychologically, recorded in folklore and recognized by psychologists as a form of hallucination. So there's something called the old hag phenomenon, which it's like in sleep paralysis, I guess, that you see this like old hag, which I've
Yeah.
never seen an old hag, but
No.
I don't know, maybe like the like my sleep paralysis demon like is one that like I've conjured up because of pop culture like today.
Mhm.
Like what I
Yeah.
envision a demon looking like is probably very different from what
Right.
they did then.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that, but the idea is that like Spring Heel Jack could be a true phantom
Mm.
attacker, that he's like not alive, like he's not
Yeah.
living. He's some
Right.
sort of spirit
Huh.
that is able to manifest in a very human way,
Mhm.
a very physical way. Um, in the most problematic cases, which Spring Heel Jack is one of them, an attack is witnessed by several people and substantiated by some physical evidence, like the scratches all over that girl.
Mhm.
The attacker cannot be verified to exist. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, like, do we blame all of these victims as having made this up, or like hysteria, mass hysteria, or
Right.
what the heck? So
Hmm.
it's really, I thought it was so interesting.
Yeah,
Like,
very. I've never
yeah,
heard of that before.
yeah.
It's a cool one though.
I hadn't either. And sorry, there's one last thing I wanted to share. There was a similar figure in Prague that was
Hmm.
reported to have been seen in the mid 1900s, 39 to 45. And it was known as Perak. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the like little sub title is The Spring Man of Prague. And it was a
Oh.
very similar vibe, like jumping over buildings and things
Hmm.
like that. So there are lots of traits that had a lot, really like resonated through, across all of Europe, really beyond just the UK.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, very interesting.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I don't know what to think. Like, I don't know.
I was just gonna ask you if you had a
I feel
theory.
like my gut instinct is that he was just some like psycho guy who was just like a
Mhm.
predator.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like I believe in other stuff too as like being possible. And why can't I think of all the people to potentially attract some sort of like demonic energy or power, of
Mhm.
course it would be someone evil, like truly
Yeah.
evil like that on their own. So I
Mhm.
guess that's my theory, is like this was like a really probably fucked up dude who was
Yeah.
like, "Hey,
Mhm.
demon, help
Yeah.
me do this bad shit I want to
Right.
do."
Invited him in.
Um, exactly.
Hmm.
So, or someone conjured him
Right.
do this. Or it was
Yeah.
like the person who wrote in to the mayor, like maybe he was a friend of the guy and like knew he was up to some brutal shit and was like, I'm
Mhm.
gonna say something.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's all very interesting.
Very. Yeah. It does sound like it was just some guy, sort of, because he only
Right.
attacked women. I mean, other
Of course.
that
Classic.
gardener was a
Yeah,
man,
that's
but
true. But
it
they
wasn't a
weren't
true
sure that
attack.
that was, yeah, and they weren't sure that it was even the same guy, you
Right.
know?
Mhm.
So yeah, he just chased him and like it could have actually just been an animal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's true.
it's hard to say.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Interesting.
there's Creepy Jack number
Creepy
one,
Jack.
Spring-Heeled Jack.
Yeah.
If you
It's
see a guy like bounding over buildings, avoid.
yeah. That's for the best. I know. Interesting. Well, okay. Next creepy Jack.
Let's
Um
go.
okay. So eyeless Jack. Um this one is a little different than what we normally do because it's a creepy pasta, which for anyone who doesn't know, creepypasta is a website where people can write in horror stories basically. So I think it's acknowledged that everything on that site is fiction. I'm not
Hmm.
certain about that, but I'm pretty sure. So Eyeless Jack is a fictional character. I don't think anyone is claiming to have actually seen
Yeah.
Eyeless Jack in real life. Although with things like that, it can turn into sort of urban legendy territory just as stories spread. People start adopting it as their own, whatever. So that might have happened with Eyeless Jack, but his origin is just a story written on this website. So, I don't have a year, but it was originally posted by somebody with the username AZElf5000. And he, I think he wrote the story based on some art that was done by Nick Teasy408. So the original drawing you can probably guess since he's an eyeless creature. It's like a
Oh.
it's a humanoid person with just really dark eye sockets basically is what the drawing
Which,
looks like.
sorry, I'm not saying ew with not having eyes because there's
Right.
nothing wrong with
Um,
being bodily different. It's
yes.
creepy because he's fucking evil.
Yeah.
Just to be
Exactly.
clear, that's why I'm saying ew.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And he yeah, no eye patches. He's not trying to cover it up and there's like goo in his eyes. So that's another added layer.
Goo. She said goo.
Goo.
Gross, dude.
Yeah. So, okay, let's read the original post. So, it goes, "Hello, my name is Mitch. I'm here to tell you guys about an experience I had. I don't know if it was paranormal or whatever stupid words people use to describe supernatural phenomena, but after that thing visited me, I believe in that paranormal trash now." Trash. Our
How
entire
dare
show.
he?
Yeah,
How dare he?
I know.
Mitch,
You're
dead to
trash.
us. You're trash, Mitch. Shut up.
Yeah. Um, okay. Then a week after I moved in with my brother Edwin, after my house was foreclosed, I finished unpacking. I will say some of these, the way he wrote this is a little bit confusing sometimes, so I
Okay.
might be changing some of the
Okay,
original
yes, yes.
language. Like that sentence was odd. But anyway, he finished unpacking a week after moving in with his brother Edwin.
Okay.
Edwin liked the idea of me moving in since we hadn't seen each other for 10 years, so I was excited too. After about a week, I heard rustling noises coming from outside at about 1 in the morning. I thought it was a raccoon, so I ignored it and tried to fall asleep. The next morning, I told Edwin about it and he agreed, which I assume he means he heard the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, the next night, however, I thought I heard my window open and a loud thump as if something entered my room. I darted up, looked around the room, but I saw nothing. The next morning, Edwin dropped his coffee cup when he saw me. He held up
Oh,
a nearby mirror, and I saw myself. I had a large gash in my left cheek. Yuck.
oh.
Yeah. Um, After I was rushed to the hospital, excuse me, my doctor told me that I must have been sleepwalking. But then he showed me something that made my blood turn cold. He lifted up my shirt to reveal a sewn up incision where my kidneys were. I st-
Were?
yeah, were. I stared into his eyes, mine widening. You somehow lost your left kidney last night, my doctor told me. We don't know how, though. Sorry, Mitch. I just think that's hilarious.
Sorry.
He wrote
Like,
that.
we need to call the police.
Yeah.
Like, what? You have an
Sorry.
incision.
Uh-huh. And that's not the last time that that appears. So I just think it's really funny.
Well, that's hilarious.
So
Sorry.
nonchalant. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, well, sorry. You still got one, so
Yeah, it's okay.
good
You'll
luck.
live.
Good luck.
um, okay, the next night was my breaking point. Around midnight, I woke up to see a truly horrifying sight. I was staring face to face with a creature with a black hoodie and dark blue mask with no nose or mouth staring down at me. The thing that scared me the most was that it had no eyes, just empty black sockets.
With goo.
Yeah, with goo. Yeah, here we go. Here's the goo. The
Yes.
creature also had some black substance dripping from its sockets. So
Oh, dripping? Come on.
I prefer
God.
goo to substance. So
Me
we'll stick
too.
with that.
Drippy blood. God damn.
Yeah, gross. Um, I grabbed a camera from the
Oh.
nearby mantle and took a
Wait, wait,
picture.
wait. Wait, 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 wait.
Yeah.
So he wakes up, he sees this guy, and he's like, let me take a pic.
Yes.
Love this story.
Which, yeah, I was like debating whether I should give my reactions to this up front or wait till after I read it. But
Okay.
when
Yeah.
you read the whole story,
Yeah, I can't help
it's
myself.
goofy. Like it's just it's silly. And like there are some weird things and I mean it's scary, the premise.
Sorry, Mitch.
But like sorry, Mitch, and your first instinct to be grabbing a camera from a nearby
Yeah.
mantle when
Mine
something's
would
in your
be
room.
throat punching this
Yeah.
thing.
So I don't know. We'll just go with it. Okay. He grabs the camera, took a picture. Immediately after taking the shot, the creature lunged at me and tried to claw open my chest to get to my lungs.
Oh!
Uh-huh. Escalated really fast. I stopped it by kicking it in the face.
Nice.
As I
Sick.
ran out of my room, I grabbed my wallet. I would need the money. I shouldn't be laughing.
Wait. What?
I, I don't know. I'm like, I was sort of like giggling at this earlier, but now that I can see you, I am gonna lose it.
I would need the money
Yeah, I would
for
need
a
the money.
Slurpee. Like,
Obviously, I would need the money. Um, okay, I ran out of my brother's house into the night. I eventually ended up in the woods near Edwin's house and tripped on a rock. I fell unconscious and woke up in the hospital. My doctor, sorry, I need to get it together. The same one who treated me before.
Okay, I'm
losing
sorry.
it. No.
I'll try to keep it together.
I can't get through this. Okay.
You can. Okay.
Okay. The doctor, the same one who treated him before, entered the room. I have good news and bad news, Mitch. My doctor started. I can't do it. So stupid. Okay. The good news is that you had minor injuries and your parents are going to pick you up. I sighed with relief. The bad news is that your brother has been killed by something. Sorry.
fine. But your brother's dead. Sorry.
Yeah. And killed by
Oh,
something.
shit.
Sorry. And that's really all it says is sorry, period.
Sorry.
Oh my god. That cracks me up. Okay. Um, my parents took me back to Edwin's house to collect my remaining belongings. Upon entering my room, I was scared but remained calm. I grabbed my camera and then stopped
Of
dead.
course.
Yeah, gotta have it.
Gotta have it.
Stopped dead in my tracks. In the hallway leading to my room, I saw Edwin's body and something small laying next to it. I retrieved it and entered my parents' car, not mentioning Edwin's corpse. I looked at the thing I had picked up and nearly vomited. I was holding my stolen, half eaten kidney with some black substance on it.
Wait. Half eaten?
Yes. So that's
Oh,
Eyeless Jack's motive is,
he wants to eat your
yeah,
organs.
gather your organs and eat them. But there's just so many like questions because how did the doctor know that his brother was dead if the corpse was still at the house
Yeah.
and he didn't mention the corpse to his parents because do they not know that he's dead? I don't know. There's
How would they
it's
not know?
I know.
They would have to fucking know.
Yeah, and no one noticed the blackened kidney next to the body.
Apparently not.
I guess not. I mean, I I know this is in our usual category of stuff and I shouldn't be making fun of it because this is like one of the all-time most popular creepypasta stories.
Yes, which is why I'm kind of like shook.
Right.
Like I thought it would be so scary.
Yeah, maybe I found like the wrong one. Maybe this is
Creepy-ass
an offshoot,
one?
but I'm pretty sure what the one I read was tagged as the original story.
Oh my god.
So maybe there are spin-off stories like using the Eyeless Jack character that got scarier from here from the
Jesus.
original, but I don't have any of those.
Okay.
So that's him. And yeah, I don't know even what else to say. I'm sorry I was cracking up in the middle of that telling. I hope if anyone loves Eyeless Jack, you're not offended.
We're so sorry.
Yeah. But
Jesus.
because of his eyes and because that was a little bit short, this doesn't fit with our Jack's theme, but
Yeah.
I just have a quick black-eyed kids story.
Oh, hell
So
yeah,
it's-
bring it.
So it's a little eye theme at the end.
Okay, we love an eye theme.
And we have done episodes, maybe multiple episodes on black-eyed kids. I can't remember for sure, but they're basically little demons with black eyes to simplify
Looking like
it.
kids. Yeah,
Yeah.
nice and creepy.
Yep. So, okay, I'm just going to read this directly. One of the stories about black-eyed kids goes like this. In a snowy town in the middle of nowhere in Vermont, an elderly couple heard the sound of 3 loud knocks on their door.
Oh, I already don't like it.
Yeah. They opened the door and saw 2 children, a boy and a girl. Our parents will be here soon. May we come in? The children did not make eye contact and just stood there in the doorway. The elderly couple were hesitant, but after a while, they let the boy and girl inside. The kids
Bad idea.
settled. Yeah, not a good idea. The kids settled on the couch while the wife made some hot cocoa, and the husband asked them questions that went unanswered. The wife returned and noticed that her cat was scared and angry with the children. May we please use the restroom? The kids said. The wife looked at the kids and she finally saw them. The children's eyes were as black as a starless night.
Oh.
She directed them to the bathroom and returned to her husband, who was covering his face with his hand. Did you see their eyes? The husband then showed her his hand full of blood from a nosebleed.
Whoa.
Yeah. The power suddenly went out, and the house turned as dark as the kids' eyes. The wife headed to the restroom and was confronted by the voice of the kids at the end of the hall, uttering, "Our parents are here."
Ew.
Yeah. The kids then exited the house, leaving the door wide open. The wife then noticed that there were two men at the end of the driveway. The men were very tall and slender. The wife waved, but did not receive the same friendly gesture. The two men and the children then drove away together in one car. I don't know who these men are, but
Yeah, what?
the power then came back on a little later after the kids left. Throughout the next week, weird things happened in the house. 3 out of 4 cats went missing, and the
Ew,
yeah,
no.
and the fourth had been found dead in a pool of its blood. The husband continued to have nosebleeds and finally went to the doctor, where he was diagnosed with a very aggressive skin cancer. And that's
No.
how it ends. So
No.
I think black eyed kids, it's either like you don't survive an encounter with them or bad things happen
They
after you see
poison you,
one.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I wonder if you see them, but it's not just seeing them, it's like inviting them in.
right. Yeah, I think
I
you
feel like
have to.
they're like vampires, kind of, in that
Yeah,
way. You have
that's
to
true.
invite them in, otherwise they can't
Hmm.
invade your
Yeah,
mind.
that's true. They're always asking to enter your car, enter your house, or whatever
Yeah.
in all the stories. Yeah,
Yeah. We did a whole episode on Black Eyed Kids, by the way. So if you haven't listened and want to revisit,
yeah,
do that.
yeah. And I have to say one other thing. On that story at the bottom, they had a place for people to comment.
Hmm.
And somebody commented,
Oh,
their
God.
pupils were probably dilated because of how stressed out they were to be away from their parents. You shouldn't exploit these kids for entertainment.
Like,
It's like,
shut up.
yeah, I mean, that's coming from the goodness of her heart, probably, but like,
Which I guess
do
I
you not
appreciate, but like, shut
know?
up.
Yeah,
She clearly hasn't heard.
yeah, it's going right over her head.
Oh my God, that's fucking funny.
Yeah.
You shouldn't exploit these black-eyed children. Like, I think people know the difference between dilated
Right.
pupils and fucking black-eyed
Yeah.
children.
Evil, creepy kids who
Because
appear
it's
out
also
of
like they
nowhere.
don't have whites in their eyes
Right.
either. It's not
Not at
just like
all.
iris is
Yeah.
black. Like, it's the
Uh-huh.
whole fucking
Yeah.
thing. Oh my God.
She doesn't
That's
get it.
hilarious. She does not get it.
Yeah. But
Oh God.
those are the Jacks.
The creepy jacks.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel better. Today was a
Good.
shitty fucking day, but you know
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
That some creepy stories really just nothing like a scary jack to lift your
Yeah.
spirits, you know?
Exactly.
It's
In
nice.
Jack we trust.
And Jack we trust. Well, thank you for tuning in. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Girls Gone Spooky, and please send us your spooky stories at girlsgonespooky@gmail.com. We
Mhm.
will talk to you next week. And
Yep.
until then, stay spooky, mother truckers.
Stay spooky. Bye.
Bye.